Welcome back to Wake Up with Cheddar. 57 years after Martin Luther King said the famous words, "I have a dream," from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, tens of thousands are expected to gather today at that very same spot for another march on Washington. This year, coming amid a heightened awareness surrounding racial injustices. This year's march, called Commitment March, Get Your Knee Off Our Necks, is a tribute to George Floyd. It will reiterate those calls for police reform, criminal justice reform, and racial equality in America. President and CEO of the NAACP, Derrick Johnson, is with us now. Great to have you on this morning. Can you tell us a bit about what's expected out of this march? Who will be speaking?
But today is a commemoration of the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. You have some people who are going to be present live. We have at ACP, we're organizing a virtual march. We want to make sure that we use this moment to pause, to re-energize, and focus on marching to the polls in November. On last night, we kicked it off with the virtual component. We had Senator Cory Booker, we had Speaker Pelosi, who joined us virtually. We have Reverend Al Sharpton, who will be having the march today, along with some of the family members, BB Whining, many others who've decided to lend their voice to this moment. I'll be asking many on your audience to log in 2020march.org to watch us on YouTube or on television. We are in a unique position in this country. We are in the midst of peaceful protests, in the midst of police violence, in the midst of senseless murders, but we have to take this moment to ensure that democracy work and march to the polls in November.
What specific policy changes are you calling for? And I want to start with policing and police departments.
Yeah. Policing, we must do away with qualified immunity to make sure that no one see themselves above the law. We have to establish a national database of police misconduct. We have to address a national standard for police accreditation so we can ensure the communities that police are served, that individuals are certified, they have the capacity, the training, the mental health to be serving in our communities. We have to take a serious look at how we are building up military arms for local law enforcement agencies and support many of our military veterans who are coming back home joining law enforcement officers. They may be suffering from levels of post-traumatic stress syndrome. There are so many other things we have to do as a nation to ensure that we are protecting and serving and keeping all of our citizens safe.
Do you have any concern that a message of defund the police that we've been hearing from some people in the Black Lives Matter movement, that might backfire given just this rise in violent crime that we're seeing across this country?
Well, many people are frustrated, and in many ways, defund police is not saying that we don't want police, and police are not a important component of our communities. What it is saying is we have to take a serious look at the budgets of police to make sure that we're not asking law enforcement officers to serve the role of mental health providers, to serve the role of anything else other than policing. If there's a scenario where a community is living in trauma, or there's a household in trauma, we need more social workers. We need more preventive programs. We need mental health facilities to address those issues. Not law enforcement. That's not fair to police officers who have not been trained in that areas. That's not fair to the taxpayers in those cities or in those counties. And we should take a serious look at, are we doing what's necessary to have a balanced approach, both preventive and enforcement? But preventive is really important. Some of the wealthiest communities across this country, you see a really robust preventive programs in place. Low income areas and areas where African Americans are being patrolled, we don't have enough preventive measures, so things will not escalate as we've seen over the recent few months.
You're also asking for the Senate to pass a bill, a voting rights bill, named after the late John Lewis. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act is really, really important. In order for this democracy to truly work, we must allow access to the ballot box. And unfortunately, we have reduced the administration of elections to a partisan consideration. It should never be a partisan consideration. We should make sure that individuals can vote without vote suppression methods. The Voting Rights Act was put in place in 1965 because there were jurisdictions with a proven history of preventing African American and Asians and many other communities from voting. That was stripped in 2010. And what we are seeking to do is reauthorize Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act so vote suppression methods will not be put in place, and we can truly say we are representative democracy and not democracy on paper only.
We have to mention, of course, that this is all happening in the backdrop of a global pandemic. Is anything being done today to just keep everybody safe? Any safety protocols in place?
Well, for the NAACP, we are doing all we can to make sure there's the necessary teleworking, social distancing, making sure our members who are across 47 states, we have established a protocol so we can communicate virtually. We are working really hard in all the states where we got to turn out to vote so voters can know their options. I think it was the House who passed a bill around mail-in voting. The city has not passed mail-in voting, and this administration is seeking to destroy the post office to prevent it. Again, this is one of those scenarios where the administration of the election has been politicized in a backdrop of a health pandemic. We should never be looking at a scenario based on what we've seen in Milwaukee during the primary elections, where people had to choose between their health and their right to vote. We should be looking at, as a nation, how do we give access to voting and the security of the ballot box so we can have the type of representative democracy and keep people safe.
All right. A big thanks for joining us today, CEO of the NAACP, Derrick Johnson. So great to have you on.